Good day traders, this is Stefanos on behalf of Tixee, and in today's webinar we'll be giving an outlook of the market for the week of the 1st until the 5th of August. Now looking at some of the highlights for next week, in the stocks front we're still within the highly anticipated earnings season. We're going to be having yet another strong week, on this occasion with more than 3,500 stocks reporting their figures, some of them including Alibaba, AMD and more that I'm going to be covering later on. On the Forex front, we of course have the all-important NFP report as it's released on the first Friday of each new month, as well as two interest rate announcements, one from Australia and one from the UK. But first, a disclaimer, as always, please note that all of the ideas discussed in the webinar are my own opinions and do not make up for any form of investment, trading advice, neither any recommendations to buy or sell. You should always do your own research and due diligence before buying or selling any securities, financial products, or instruments, and whether you use any kind of trading strategies. Any information that relates to past performance is not indicative of future results. So looking at stocks, like we mentioned, and if you were tuned in for last week's look back, you would have noticed that we said we'd be having 3,000 stocks reporting their figures last week. And as we mentioned in this week's look back on this occasion, if you thought that was a pretty big number, well, wait for next week because obviously we're going to have even more, which as we mentioned during the intro is more than 3,500. Now, in terms of our earnings calendar, what I like using, and I've mentioned previously as well, is Market Insider earnings calendar. The reason being because it's a very simple interface. You don't have any sort of like distraction. It's pretty much the economic calendar itself. Now you have all of the dates that you can choose here, and it also gives you in this little box the number of stocks that are going to be releasing their figures either on a given day or a given week. So in our case, we're setting it to next week. Of course, feel free to use any kind of earnings calendar you want. I'm just mentioning my own personal preference. So yeah, like we can see here, so we'll be having some of the major ones that we also mentioned during the intro. It's going to be Tesla, which is going to be on the 4th of August. We have Berkshire Hathaway on the 1st. Obviously, this is not listed on Tixee's platform, but you can just still keep note of it. We're going to be having Alibaba, AMD, HSBC, there's Caterpillar, there's Starbucks, British Petroleum, PayPal, and so on and so forth. So you can see it's quite a substantial number of stocks. Like we mentioned, you can see here it's more than 3,500. So yeah, if you want, you can of course go through the whole list. What I like doing, if you want to quickly see whether it's on Tixee's platform as well, so you can just go back here. And then you can just go to trading and then you can go to stocks. And what I do here essentially is you can just do, you can hit on your keyboard. It's going to be Control F for Windows users. It's going to be Command F for Mac users. And you can see you have this little box in the top right, and you can just pretty much search the stock ticker. So if you do, for example, Tesla, so you can just type the ticker, and you can see you get one instance, which obviously the stock you can see there. Starbucks, you can just set SBUX, which is pretty much the same. We mentioned AMD, British Petroleum. So you get the point. You can just pretty much search the ticker up there, and it's gonna come up if there's actually the stock on the platform that you can trade. And yeah, it's like a fast way of just pretty much seeing whether the stock is listed or not. Obviously, if you have a dual monitor setup, it's even easier because you can have on one screen obviously just the list of stocks like from Market Insider, and you can just at the same time you can just be typing in the stock ticker itself. Now aside from the actual stock names that you can see here who are reporting their figures, the other important kind of piece of information you want to be paying attention for is the time of the release of the event. And by saying time, what I mean is whether it's going to be released, the figure is going to be released on the in the pre-market hours of a given day or in the after hours, so after the market close. So if we look at Tesla, for example, like we said, it's going to be on the 4th of August. Now, is it going to be on the 4th in the pre-market, or is it going to be on the 4th after the market close? You can find out that information just by Googling pretty much Tesla earning report or like Tesla Tesla earnings release time, for example, and you should be able to get that piece of information because it has to be made public as well. So you can be well aware in advance as well at the time of the release. And obviously that plays a pretty important factor because if it's going to be in the pre-market hours, then you can pretty much expect the impact to be seen with the open on the same day. But if it's going to be in the after hours, then obviously the impact will be seen with the open on the very next day. And just referencing the example we covered during the look back, we mentioned Amazon's earning report. So if I just type in Amazon here, Amazon reported their figures after the market close, so you're pretty much going to see what I mean. So yeah, this is the day that the earnings report was released, and it was after the market close, so you can see with the very next day, that's when stock prices surged by more than 10%. So definitely an important piece of information, because had you not known that, you could be trading Amazon all the way from the morning. Of course, you can do that if you want to position yourself earlier, but obviously we're talking about deliberate trading, so knowing that it was going to be in the after hours and you're specifically looking to trade the earnings report itself, and obviously knowing that it was in the after the market close would have been pretty crucial if you wanted, depending on how you wanted to position yourself during the release. So yeah, that's with regards to stocks. Like I said, it's quite a substantial number. Obviously you don't have to trade all of those stocks. But obviously you can just note down the basket of stocks that interest you and decide on which ones you want to trade that are also going to be available on tixee's platform. And yeah, moving on to Forex, we have, like we said during the intro, the all-important NFP report, which also comes just a little over a week next Friday after the Fed's interest rate decision, which we had last week, that took place on Wednesday. So it's going to be yet another quite significant piece of event for the US markets and the US dollar specifically. The reason being because the Fed's chairman Jerome Powell in the meeting minutes, so after the release of the rate, in the meeting minutes he mentioned that the reason as to why he doesn't believe the US is in a recession is due to the strong employment data, which of course is what we're going to be getting next week as well, and which is why it's going to be even more interesting. Now you can also get the economic calendar, from tixee's website. You can just navigate to this tab here and then just go over to the economic calendar. And just like we saw with the earnings one, you have the filters that you can use to readjust the data. For this occasion, I'm going to set it to next week, and the impact to medium and high impact event. So yes, we can see pretty much from Monday in the early morning hours, we're going to be having manufacturing data from China. In the regular EU session, we're going to have retail sales figures from Germany, followed by unemployment data from Italy, and then manufacturing data as well in general from the Eurozone. We will have unemployment data from the Eurozone as well, starting from Monday. And again, always just making note of this tooltip here, which can pretty much give you a rough idea of the volatility you can expect in the hours following the event. So scrolling through Monday, we're going to be finishing the day off with manufacturing data from the US. Then moving on to Tuesday. So this is one of the other key events we mentioned in the intro as well. We're going to have the interest rate decision from Australia and the UK. The UK is going to be later on a different day, but obviously Australia is going to be on Tuesday in the early morning hours. These are all in UK's time zone. So we can see with the figures on the right hand side here, the existing figure is 1.35, and they're expected to rise by 50 basis points to 1.85%. So you can see that they're also following through, just like with the Fed. Of course, the Fed, they hiked rates by 75 basis points, but still we can see banks being proactive in with regards to hiking rates. Then in the regular EU session, we'll have consumer confidence figures from Switzerland as the other high impact event of the day. Then you're going to get the first hint of job data from the US with the JOLTS job openings at 3 in the afternoon UK time. And then towards the end of the day, we'll also get unemployment data from New Zealand. Of course, for them, it's going to be regular morning hours, but of course in the UK, it's still going to be 11:45 at night. Then moving on to Tuesday, in the regular EU, sorry, it's going to be Wednesday in the regular EU session. We will be having the trade balance figure from Germany, which is going to be closely followed by inflation data from Switzerland. And looking at the rest of the event, so after the inflation rate from Switzerland, scrolling further through, we'll have the global UK services figure from the UK at 9:30, followed by the retail sales figure from the Eurozone. And then in the early afternoon hours, we're going to have non-manufacturing data from the US. Then moving on to Thursday, we have trade balance figures, this time from Australia. It's going to be at 2:30 a.m. UK time. And then towards midday, that's when we'll have the next interest rate decision of the week, which is going to be from the UK. And as we can see, just like with Australia, there's going to be the expectation of a 50 basis point hike here as well. On this occasion, going from 1.25, which is the current rate, to 1.75. And then scrolling further through, later on during midday, again, UK hours, we're going to have not one, but two trade balance figures, one from the US and then the next one from Canada. And then going on to Friday, and pretty much the day probably with the most high impact events, as you can see here. So we'll have a statement on monetary policy, which is similar to the meeting minutes from the FOMC, but it's going to be from Australia at 2:30 a.m. in the UK time. We'll have interest rate decision from India as well at 5:30. And then leading up to the probably most important event of the week, which is going to be the NFP report from the US. And as always, it's pretty much being released at the same time with the Canadian job report, or should I say the Canadian job report is released at the same time as the US one. So yeah, definitely quite a few high impact events with regards to the FX market. And since we're on the topic of the economic calendar, going back to Wednesday, we have the usual oil inventory report. I mean, obviously, other than that, when we're talking about oil prices, aside from the inventory report, like we said, we have the NFP report as well, which is obviously going to be impacting not just the dollar, but the Canadian dollar as well. So given that, we can obviously expect the prices of oil to be impacted quite strongly from the job report, both again from the US and Canada as well. And the same thing applies for gold as well, but in the case of gold, it's mostly going to be the job report from the US. The reason why I mentioned that it's of essence to keep an eye on the Canadian one in terms of oil prices is obviously because Canada is also one of the world's largest exporters of oil as well, so that's obviously another market that's pretty much going to be impacting oil prices, and vice versa. When we get increases or decreases in oil prices, we can expect to see that translate onto the Canadian dollar in the FX market as well. And lastly, looking at some in the crypto market and specifically Bitcoin. Let me just pull up the chart. Looking at the chart itself, we can see there hasn't been much going on in terms of price action. I mean, we're still within this area that we've been discussing over the last few weeks. I would say personally that prices are pretty much in a consolidating phase. We can see we're not making any strong movements. Of course, we are slowly trending higher, but again, it's not like a vertical move as we can see here that we're just moving strongly down. It's pretty much just stair-stepping its way back up into this area right here, which is when I would say things are going to start becoming a little bit more interesting, because it's going to be an area that's probably going to be watched by quite a few traders, and which could potentially dictate whether we're going to get a break above and move towards the upside, or whether we'll continue trending lower and lower, with the next level of significance being around the 14,000 mark. Of course, it largely depends on how the price is gonna reach these levels. If we start seeing more parabolic moves towards the upside, so it starts printing larger candlesticks like this, and then it's just like consolidating in this area, we could potentially see prices breaking above, retesting, and then going higher. But instead, if we just see it instead carrying on the way it is now, so just like slowly stair-stepping its way up here, and then just trend consolidating around this level, we could potentially get a strong move down, which could initiate the next move towards the downside. So again, it very much depends on how prices are going to be moving into this level, and obviously just keeping an eye on your technical indicators, which for now having plotted 2 moving averages, so the one being the 8-period exponential and the other one the 21-period exponential. Looking at the crossover right now, it's of course pointing towards the downside. So again, once prices reaches this area here, that's when at that point I expect the moving averages to pretty much come back together. And that's when we're likely going to start seeing a little bit more frequent crossovers before we have the deciding one, which can also help us make a decision as to which direction we want to position ourselves with. And yeah, this is for us the outlook for next week's markets. I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, trade safe.